Oh my god.
No,
Wow.
no.
Oh my
Take those
God.
cards back.
What?
No, no, no.
That's right. Nano Noko could not believe the crazy fold that Kristen Foxen made with Pocket Kings just yesterday during the Triton High Roller final table. I'm not going to waste too much time. I want to get right into watching this insane hand, but there's a lot more going on here than just whether or not Kings is a call, and we're going to use OCTOPI to break it all
Be
down.
strong here.
All right. I'm just going to let the hand play out. We'll talk about it after. But it's already started off with under the gun, shoving all in for just short of 8 big blinds with Queen Jack suited. And Elton saying under the gun +1 has called with pocket tens. It's the final table of the Triton $100,000. That's a 6-figure buy-in main event. Huge spot.
9s and 10s, you know, maybe 8s, but maybe not also. So you've only really got 2 over pairs.
I'm going to increase the playback speed just a bit.
I think it really is the bottom.
This feels like the bottom, yeah. And then as Elton, you know, maybe the price is just a little too good. Kings for Kristen Foxen. This is real life.
Wow.
We still have button, small blind, and big blind
This is
act.
crazy.
What a spot for Chris.
Just real quick, you can see Philip Sternheimer ends up deciding on the jam for his 3.775 million chips. The big blind's 150,000, so it's just short of 30 big blinds, 25 big blinds, give or take. Elton saying covers, and Kristen Foxen has just short of 20.
Well, now Elton
We'll let the hand play out.
So.
We'll get into
now. He might have gotten away with it
the
anyway,
nitty-gritty
because
after.
chips, and it is early position versus early position, and he's at the bottom of his range, or towards the bottom of his range.
So likely a 3-way all in. As Foxen takes a little bit of time. And Ketzer is just hating this. He's saying she's bleeding deep into
She
her
spends
tank.
2 minutes tanking.
Oh
more
my
than
God.
2
No,
minutes
no,
almost.
Oh
take
my
those
God.
cards back.
What?
No, no, no.
And she decides on a
No.
fold.
She folded
That's
kings.
when you're thinking, you know, ICM too much, but you have to remember in a tournament, you know, it is very top heavy. This is just sitting there like, why couldn't I just not had an all in hand in this one?
He's smiling.
He has an obvious
All right,
fold
they're out.
with tens, in my opinion.
Chris's not gonna like to see
King
this.
jacks and the jack is dead.
It's like he
He's
is.
like, you gotta be kidding. He couldn't have folded kings, could you?
Ketzer is thrilled to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, can Ketzer find a queen because he is live with the kings in the muck.
They turn a king.
Wow, there not many people in this tournament would lay down those kings there.
That's an unnecessary. That's an unnecessary dig. Obviously, not too many. Most people would not fold kings there. That's not a compliment, by the way.
Just to rub it in.
That's a dig.
Wow, and what a free roll for Sternheimer.
Yeah, Sternheimer, you know, he did cover Chrissy, but he would have been down to just 800K or so.
Yeah, almost out the door. And instead, he's picking up this pot.
Okay, so obviously, a lot going on in this hand. So going back to the start, the big blind 75, 150, 150. Felipe has just short of 8 big blinds. He shoves all in with Queen Jack suited. Arguably a mistake. We're gonna look at OctopiPoker.ai's vault, find some comparable sims, see what it says. But in my opinion, he should have probably shoved 5.5 or 4.5 big blinds, kept some chips back because he's got the whole table to go through. And in case it goes shove, shove, or, you know, call, shove, shove, he can get away, save his chips because he's probably only up against kings or better at that point. So he has 2 unders, drawing very slim. But he just whips it in there. Elton saying, I think, does a good job here just calling, which he should really be doing with the bulk or if not his entire range for the same reasons. In case there's crazy action behind it, allows him to call a hand like tens and not commit his entire stack. That brings us to the first big mistake, and I think the vault is going to agree, is pocket jacks here. What do you do? Now, I believe pocket jacks should put more chips into the pot here. I don't think it's a fold. But Sternheimer just wings in his 25 or so very valuable big blinds when he could have easily clicked it. For the same reasons, in case it goes, someone wakes up, there's still a whole table behind. There's still several players that are left to act. If someone behind ends up still going all in, and Elton saying ends up calling, he can get away. Because again, just like Queen Jack suited, just like pocket tens would be, jacks would be now up against kings or better. Because I don't even think queens, it's just kings or better at that point. So he can preserve the bulk of his stack for this final table. By just shoving all in, he commits his entire stack. In addition, I think it also caps his range a bit. Because I think if he has aces here, he's going to be a bit more cautious. And that's why I think Kristen Foxen didn't fully consider the spot.
You know, maybe the
and
price
that brings
us
us
kings for Kristen Foxen.
to Kristen in this spot with 2.9 million, sub 20 big blinds, and this crazy action ahead. Now, just from like a realistic level, and before we look at the sims and see what it's going to say, the sims aren't going to consider future game, and future game is incredibly important. And I always say this whenever talking about a final table ICM spot. is always first ask yourself, what's the result of the hand? If you win, what's the result if you lose? If we lose here, Queen Jack suited is the under the gun player Felipe is obviously the widest range. So he's very likely to bust in this hand, almost no matter what behind you. So we're nearly guaranteed to get at least eighth if we bust. It's not the end of the world. It's one pay jump. Now he could have a good hand, but he wouldn't bust us. But if we win this hand, if one of these other two players don't have aces that cover us, and we hold the kings, we're going to propel ourselves into a clear second in chips. And not just, obviously, second's not always the best. Like, you want to be a chip leader or not necessarily risk your chips. But in this spot, the bulk of the final table here has basically the stacks that Elton and Steinheimer have of about 25 to 30 big blinds. So she would propel herself to having about 9 million in chips or 60 big blinds, be a clear second in chips, nearly guarantee making, a final 4 or 3 run, barring any crazy coolers in the future. So right off the bat, the future game is huge in this spot to win this all in. So just on that reason alone, Kings is good enough to get in here. But then if you really break down this spot and you really think it through, and that's why I'm surprised he spent 2 minutes and then come to this conclusion. Under the gun shove, 8 big blinds, going to be wide. Under the gun one, when he just calls here, he has way more hands that are going to call fold than call. The only call here really would be aces based on this action behind. So, yeah, sometimes we jam and Elton wakes up with aces, but he's more often than not, there's way more combinations of tens, jacks, queens, ace king, ace queen, all hands, ace queen suited, all hands that are just going to call this initial shove. So with that being said, like, we're not entirely worried about his range. And then if we look at Sternheimer, who just rips it in there over the call, doesn't click it, doesn't do any sort of inducing, and it's sure he might have aces sometimes, but to think that it doesn't also include queens a lot, doesn't include jacks, and for sure has ace king in there. Think of this hand. So like with in the reality of the situation, based on the way that these players approach the spot, based on, I mean, Elton played the hand fine, but Sternheimer just shoving all in there. In my opinion, like, Kings is just clearly ahead enough of the time to put it in. And then when you add the future game impact, I think Kings is a clear call. Now, the sim also will agree based on their action, but let's go take a look at OCTOPIPoker.ai and see how we should play the spot from Elton's perspective, from Philip's perspective, and then obviously the fold heard all around the world. And even Felipe, like, there's something to learn from every single position here. This is a very unusual spot, but it does happen, and it could save your next big final table. And not busting, because like, I wish I knew some of these things early on in my career. I would have saved a lot of money. So let's get right into it. Let's go look at the OCTOPIPoker.ai vault. Use my code, by the way, to get 50% off your first month or 2 months free if you sign up for a whole year. The best ICM final table study tool on the internet, the vault. Let's take a look. The community was asking for a home game, and we decided to make a community-only poker club, and we are running cash games every single day and tournaments. But the biggest tournament of the week is the $50 Sunday Weekender, and I am giving away 3 tickets every week to 3 different members in my Discord. If you want to get involved, want to join, or find out how to enter, join the Discord today and come play with a bunch of chicken burger degenerates in the No Limit Hold'em and PLO streets. Get involved, join the Discord, link below. Back to the video. Okay, I'm going to make this as quick and simple as possible, but what we have here are already pre-ran simulations that OCTOPIPoker.ai has provided, and it's pulled from all the final tables that have ever been live streamed. They take the hands and they run the sims for you, so you can. It's just really a cool tool to have if you're watching back some old final tables or just trying to find some cool, interesting spots to study and you don't have time to run your own sim. And that's what I'm trying to showcase here today. I found a spot that's similar enough, going to give us a good enough result. Maybe not perfect. There's obviously some differences and nuances that need to be considered. But at the end of the day, I think this will give us a good general idea. Now, the first thing I said is that the under the gun player should have just shoved 4.5 big blinds. And you can see they gave that option here. So what we have here is a color coding system. And this chart is all the possible hands in No Limit Hold'em. The top side, the top right corner here, are all suited hands. The hands running down the middle that separate the top and the bottom are pocket pairs. The bottom are all the offsuit combinations. The different colors are different inputs that they gave. They gave an option to fold, obviously, which is gray. Everywhere you see gray is folding. Yellow is min raising, even off 7 bigs, and you can see it is getting used some. You min raise the 2 big blinds for 7 big blind under the gun player here. And then the bulk of the range wants to do the dark red or the pink, which is raising to 4.6 or shoving all in. I think in practice, you guys should always use the 4.6 here because people respond to it as if you're effectively shoving. And it's always nice to give yourself that out of 4.6 big blinds and folding if there's crazy action behind. And that's a common theme that you're going to see here on this final table. Now, in game, that's a common theme you're going to see in ICM in general, is you always want to give yourself the out of not committing your entire stack, especially when there's several uncapped ranges behind left act, or if one of the ranges that have already acted is uncapped. You want to always see or give yourself that option to still fold, not commit your entire stack. And that's not what took place on this final table. You'll see it's a clear mistake, but either way, the first player went all in. And now I know there's some differences with the stacks here, but the ranges are going to be relatively similar. So the first thing is Elliot Seng's decision to just call. He should be calling his entire range here that puts chips in. This has them calling as far down as 8s, and this is only off 27 big blinds. But he's able to call as far down as pocket 8s. By the way, this final table hand, I believe, was from the main event a couple years ago. Just an interesting little tidbit of information. So pocket 8s is indifferent. It's mixing folds and calls. Probably would just pass on that in game. But for the most part, his entire range just wants to call here. There's some shoves you can ignore. That's a low frequency thing. And that's what Elliot does in game. And that brings us to the next player, Pocket Jacks. And what you're going to notice is very few hands want to shove all in. Pink is all in. The yellow and orange is another min raise or small 3-bet size to the all in and call. So you're basically leaving yourself an option with the bulk of your range, including aces, to always get away. Jacks is doing some folding. You see a little bit of gray in here, some clicking to 13.2 bigs, and some clicking to a bit larger. I don't know why they gave these multiple clicking sizes. Queens wants to do something similar but uses a bigger size. That's irrelevant. The point is, as you can see, only ace, king suited, and kings and aces does it a little bit, and ace, king, a little bit want to really commit their stack in this spot at any amount of time, but every hand will mix clicking. It's just a clear mistake. You don't want to commit your stack here with pocket jacks to have to call off an all in or be forced in all in with so many uncapped ranges left to act. And uncapped obviously means that they still have all the possible hands, really strong hands in their range. And under the gun here, or under the gun 1 is uncapped because he just called. That leaves all his hands, like aces and kings, still in that range. The only range that's capped here would be the under the gun player, assuming that he doesn't always just shove, that he sometimes is going to min raise aces and kings. So he should almost never have aces. Shoving is allowed with some hands, and that's what he does in game. And I think if jacks is supposed to shove, it would just strengthen the argument to calling kings. If queens is supposed to do any shoving, we just strengthen the argument for calling kings. And even if we give those two combos of shoves and we say they're always going to shove aces, kings is still going to be a call. It's not going to. And this is also, by the way, doesn't even consider the future game. It's going to be Kristen Foxen, obviously a little bit deeper, still covered by the shove of the low jack player, and kings is just firmly in there. There's obviously a big difference between queens and kings in this spot. Queens is losing $500,000. Kings is making $250,000 by calling. By folding, you're just breaking even. You're not actually losing money, but you're losing out on the potential EV of around $250,000 if it was the main event. In her spot, probably about 40% of that. So she probably lost out on about $100K in EV by folding. And that's without future game again. But with that being said, the big theme, the big takeaway is always on a final table, give yourself an option to fold if there's crazy action potentially taking place behind. I'm telling you, people also are going to respond not like a computer to this. So like when you click it, you're never going to get like 4-bet jam bluffed and have to fold jacks, or like someone's just going to go crazy and then someone else is going to be like, oh, he clicked it because he might fold. So now they're going to look down at some hand. People are all going to just assume your range is pretty strong when you do that and you have no folds. So like there's really no downside to doing it. Preserve your chips, join the Discord, sign up for OCTOPI, the best study tool. They have Sick Trainer, they have tons of regular pre-solve sims, and of course they have the Vault final table sims. You can learn a shit ton. If you have any questions or whatever, I'm very active in the Discord. Join the Discord. Join the poker club. I'm out. Peace.